in the girls union to share, I think, on their website, and I believe we'll post it on our website as well. And so what I'm going to do is introduce a couple people from our staff who will do most of the presenting. Like I said, I'll kind of jump in where I feel like I could add a little context or explanation if necessary. But Nate McCoy, Nate, I don't know, wave your hand or something, but you'll be on in just a second. Nate's going to be, he's our director of handicapping and course rating. He's a very accomplished player in his own right. He knows the rules very, very well. Even though his role isn't necessarily as a championship guy, he helps out at tons of our events and officiates at the Big 12 and stuff like that every year. And then Karli Kerrigan, who will lead us off here. Karli is our director of competition. She played college golf at Grandview, is in her second year full-time with the IGA, was an intern for a couple of years, and recently completed her first full experience with the National Rules of Golf Workshop. So these two taught one last night up in Manchester in front of about 100 kids and coaches. So I'm sure they'll just be able to repeat everything they did last night just via digital format today. So Karli, go ahead and take it away. I will get my screen share going here in just a second to show the seminar and try to manage this as best I can from my side of things. Okay, can you see the screen now, hopefully? Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, so before we dive into the rules, we'll do a little briefing kind of on who we are as the IGA and all the stuff that we do. Obviously, we do a lot of things with championships. That's probably where most of you guys have interacted with us. But we also are in charge of handicapping and course rating, like Chad mentioned. That's kind of Nate's expertise and what he does mostly on a daily basis. We conduct all of the IGA championships that you see on our website. And we also run USGA qualifiers within the state of Iowa. And then we offer a couple of scholarships. So for you coaches that have some graduating seniors in the next couple of months, if they're looking to get some extra money for college, head over to our website. I think we have about a little over a week before scholarships are due. So if you have any seniors that are interested in that, definitely have them apply. We also run a program called Youth on Course, which it just gets younger kids under the age of 18 involved with golf and at a cheaper discounted rate. So you can sign up and then you can go and play at a participating Youth on Course facility for around $5. And it's a great program just to get more kids involved in the game of golf. We also administer the Iowa Golf Hall of Fame, and that encompasses players, superintendents, people that have been around the game of golf for a long time, whether they were a player or a rules official or even a coach, whether it's at the high school or the collegiate level. And if you want any more information on us, you can visit us at our website, iowagolf.org. So today, our presentation, we're going to go over the 2023 rule changes. There's been a couple of key ones that we'll touch on briefly before we really dive into kind of the bigger rules of the presentation. We'll start first with the 5 areas of the golf course, and we'll move then into teeing area, stroke and distance, out of bounds, provisional golf balls. We'll go through dropping procedures, penalty areas, bunkers, abnormal course conditions, embedded ball. We'll go over putting green, what you can and can't do on a putting green, as well as how to take an unplayable ball. And then if there is some uncertainty, how to go about playing 2 golf balls and the procedure for that. So in 2023, we had a couple of major rule changes that you'll see that come into effect. Being back of the line relief, as we get deeper into the presentation, we'll go over what that new procedure will look like. We'll also cover ball moved by natural forces such as wind, and what happens if your ball does move from one area of the course to another. Replacing damaged clubs. Players are now able to replace their club if it's damaged during the round, except for in the case of abuse, or you can continue to play with that club or repair it on course. Also, a new rule this year, Rule 25, is modifications for players with disabilities. So previously, what you would have to do is write in kind of on your local rules sheet any sort of policy or model local rule that you wanted to put into effect based on the players in your field. Now golf is just becoming more inclusive, so those rules are already written into the game of golf. So as a tournament administrator or an official in charge, you don't actually have to go through any additional steps of writing in any of that information into your rule sheet. It's already covered under the rules. And then the last one, which most of you probably won't have to deal with too much on the high school side, is handicap on scorecards. And in the event that you get a handicap incorrectly, it's now up to the committee to correct that rather than the player. Any questions on changes? All right, so first we're going to dive into the defined areas of the golf course. So the purpose of this rule, it's important to know the area of the golf course where your ball is at, because what you can do in specific areas of the golf course is going to impact how you play a shot or what your relief options may be if you do need to take, whether it's an unplayable ball relief or penalty area relief. So just understanding exactly where your golf ball is at is going to let you as a coach keep your players informed so they know what their options are. All right, so what is the golf course? So the course is going to be the entire area of play within the edge of any boundaries set by the committee. So as you can see on the right side of your screen, we've got some white dotted lines. That's going to be the boundary of the golf course. So everything inside of those white dotted lines is going to be in bounds and a part of the golf course. Everything outside of those white dotted lines is going to be out of bounds and therefore not a part of the golf course. So it's a little backwards starting with general area, but the general area is called the general area because it's pretty much anything that's not a specific part of the golf course. So this would be your fairway, your rough, your wooded areas, anything that's not marked with as a red penalty area, yellow penalty area, or out of bounds. This is generally where golfers are going to play most of their shots from. So as we can see on the first picture, we've got a couple of blue boxes. Those are going to be other teeing areas. And because that's not the specific teeing area for the hole where the golfer must begin play from, it's going to be treated as general area. Now, the yellow box that we see on that first picture, that's the teeing area on the hole that the golfer is currently playing. So that's going to be treated as a little bit of a different area than a tee box, say 30 yards ahead of them, even if it is on the same hole. And the same thing goes for greens. All other putting greens, other than the hole that you are currently playing, is going to be treated as general area and as wrong greens. And so the policies and procedures for taking relief from those is going to look a little bit different. We see on the second picture, the yellow arrow, that's going to be pointing to the hole of the putting green of the hole that the player is currently playing, whereas all the other greens around it are going to be treated as wrong greens in this instance. So now we've covered general area, we're going to look at the 4 other specific areas of the golf course. The first one being the teeing area. This is where you're going to start every single hole that you play from. And determining the area of the course where the ball lies is going to be really important, so that way you know exactly what you can or cannot do. So if we look at this picture, we'll see that we have a yellow line for a penalty area, and to the right of that yellow line, that's the penalty area, whereas to the left, it's the general area. We see that the golf ball is lying in both the general area and the penalty area. However, a golf ball can only be lying and treated as being in one area of the golf course. So a rule of thumb for this is whatever If a ball is ever touching a line, it's always being treated as in. So for this picture, because part of the golf ball is touching the line to the penalty area, we are going to treat that golf ball as being in the penalty area, not in the general area. And the same can be said for out of bounds. If any part of the golf ball is touching in bounds, that golf ball will be treated as being inbound. So even if it's just half of a dimple on the golf ball that's inbounds, that entire golf ball is inbounds and can be played. So the order of the specific areas of the golf course is really important, because sometimes your ball might lie between two specific areas of the golf course. So as we can see on this picture, we've got a penalty area to the left and a bunker to the right, with our golf ball right on that penalty area line. So the order of importance in determining which area of the golf course a ball lies in is first going to be the penalty area. So in this picture, with the ball being right on the line of the penalty area and the bunker, we're going to treat the ball as being in the penalty area rather than the bunker, because we know penalty area trumps bunker. And then if a ball is right on the line between a bunker and a putting green, it's going to be treated as being in the bunker. And then when it comes to putting greens, if your ball is right on the edge of the fringe and the putting green, as long as any part of that golf ball is touching the putting green, it'll be treated as being on the putting green. So any procedure that you're allowed to do when your ball is on the putting green, you will be able to do without getting penalized. Any questions with area of the course? All right. Okay, so the next area of the course we're going to look at is going to be the teeing area. So like I said, with that first picture, the teeing area is where we start out every single hole we play. And you must play from the defined teeing area that has been set by the committee. So the teeing area is going to be a rectangle that is 2 club lengths deep. And the way that we measure the teeing area is it's from the forwardmost point of the teeing markers, as well as the outermost points from those markers. So we can see on this picture that we've got some rope going around. Anywhere inside of those ropes, a player can either put a ball on the ground or tee it up and play from there. They are good to go anywhere from within that defined teeing area zone, if you want to think about it like that. And something else that I think a lot of people don't realize, a ball is not going to be in play until a stroke is made. If a ball falls off the tee before a player has made a stroke at it, it doesn't count. You can pick the ball up and you can re-tee. We often hear stories of guys that, they'll put their driver down and they'll accidentally knock their ball off the tee, and someone in their group will say, hey, that's one. That's actually a myth. It's not a penalty. It's not a stroke. You can just re-tee. And on top of that, you're able to move the ball anywhere within the teeing area. So if you go to put your club down and your ball falls off the tee, you can remove the tee from the ground and you can move it anywhere within your 2 club lengths defined teeing area, re-tee, and then the ball will be in play once you make a stroke at it. All right, so now we'll move into Rule 18, stroke and distance relief, lost ball and out of bounds. So when a ball is lost when it is lost outside of a penalty area or comes to rest out of bounds, and the required progression of playing from the teeing area to the hole is broken, a player must resume this progression by playing again from where the previous stroke was made. This rule also is going to cover how and when a provisional ball might be played to save time. And this is something that we always tell players at our events. If you're nervous about losing your ball or not being able to find it, hit a provisional. It's a lot easier just to spend 15 seconds hitting a provisional than have to walk up 250 yards to not find your ball and turn around and walk back. So when a ball is lost, a ball is only lost when it is not found in 3 minutes after the player or their caddy begins to search for it. You'll often see in high school tournaments players that have mom and dad following along, and they might walk ahead of the group to watch for golf balls that players are teeing off with. And So in this instance, if a player tees off, they are allowed to walk up. They're given a reasonable amount of time to make their way from the teeing area to where they believe their ball has come to rest. And that's when the 3-minute search will start. Now, the other side of this is a player cannot spend too much time lollygagging because they think that they're going to give mom and dad and their coach some extra time to look for their golf ball. They need to take an appropriate amount of time to walk from the teeing area to where their ball, they believe their ball to be at. And once they have come to that area, that's when the 3-minute clock will start. Right, and a ball is going to be in bounds when any part of the ball lies on or touches the ground or anything else, such as any natural or artificial object inside the boundary edge. So like I said a few slides ago, a ball is always going to be treated as being in either in bounds or in the penalty area. So if we look at these pictures, we can see that the golf balls that have the green check mark, if we look at this first picture on the left, that the ball that is right on the edge of the boundary, because part of it is touching the golf course side of that boundary line, that ball is going to be treated as being in bounds. And the picture to the right of that, where instead of using stakes to define the boundary, we have a white line. The one golf ball that's on the white line that has the red X, the reason that ball is going to be out of bounds is because the entire golf ball is on that boundary line. Whereas the ball just ahead of it, because part of that golf ball is touching the golf course, we are going to treat that ball as being in bounds. And the boundary line extends upwards. So if you want to think about it like a pane of glass, it's going to go straight up from where that line or those stakes would be at. So using this picture, for example, we see that the golf ball is about 20 yards up the tree, but because it is on the course side of that white line that we see along the ground, that ball is going to be treated as being in bounds and in play. Now, when a ball is in bounds, a player is allowed to stand out of bounds to play the ball back onto the golf course. The same can be said for penalty areas. If your ball is in the general area, if a player needs to take stance and have their feet inside the penalty area, that is completely allowed, just as long as where the golf ball is at. That's all we're going to be looking for to determine if the ball is in play. Now, if your golf ball is either lost or out of bounds, a player must take stroke and distance relief. They do so by adding one penalty stroke and then playing either the original ball or another ball from the spot where the previous stroke was made. So we can do this from the teeing area, the general area, a bunker, a penalty area, or even a putting green. Players are always allowed to take penalty of stroke and distance relief at any point throughout their round. Provisional golf balls, we'll get into that. This is going to save your players a lot of time, especially if they're playing a course that they're unfamiliar with. Like I said, we always recommend players to hit a provisional golf ball if they're not sure that they'll be able to find their original golf ball. So the definition of a provisional golf ball is just another golf ball played in case the ball just played by the player may be out of bounds or lost outside of a penalty area. A provisional ball is not the golfer's ball in play unless it becomes the ball in play under Rule 18.3C. So before we play a provisional golf ball, we need to make sure that we are announcing that it is a provisional golf ball. So before the next stroke is made, player must announce that they're going to play this. Now, it's not enough to just throw another ball down and say, I'm hitting again, or I'm going to hit another. Players need to clearly state that they are going to be playing a provisional golf ball. Now, the rules of golf have gotten a little bit more lenient over the last few years, and now the USGA and the RNA have allowed for players to say, I'm going to hit another one just in case. But we recommend to all players and all coaches just to make sure that they're using the word provisional before hitting a second shot. All right, so now the provisional ball is in play. When should it be abandoned? A provisional ball has not yet become the ball in play, and it must be abandoned in either of the two following cases. First being, we find the original golf ball, whether that's anywhere on the golf course within the boundary of the course. So that could be outside of a penalty area, but also before the end of the 3-minute search, the player then must play the original ball as it lies. They now have to abandon their provisional ball because we know the status of the original ball and the original ball is in play. The other times we need to abandon a provisional golf ball is if the original ball is found in a penalty area. The player must either play the original ball as it lies or take penalty relief under Rule 17.1D. And even if we don't find the original ball in the penalty area, if it is known or virtually certain to be in the penalty area, the player must take penalty area relief under Rule 17.1. In either case, if the player either finds their original golf ball or it is known or virtually certain to have come to rest in a penalty area, a player must not take any more strokes at the provisional ball as it is now deemed a wrong ball. And all strokes with that provisional ball before it was abandoned do not count. So even if it took you 10 strokes to get to where you find your original golf ball, those 10 strokes do not count. Any questions with teeing area, stroke and distance, out of bounds, provisional ball?
I was just going to add a little context to the part where Karli was talking about if you hit a provisional ball from the tee and then upon arrival at where you think your original may or may not be, you then discover that either your ball's in the penalty area or you now have virtual certainty that your ball's in the penalty area. And an example of that would be, hey, somebody tells you, I saw your ball go in the penalty area. That would count as virtual certainty that that's where your ball's at. That's okay that you hit the provisional from the tee, because at the time, the question we asked as rules officials is, what did you know at the tee box? And if you're questioning at the tee whether you lost your ball or not outside of a penalty area, like you might even know there's a penalty area over there, but there's also trees and a lot of tall rough and whatever. You generally are like, I don't know if it got to the penalty area or not. You're going to be okay hitting the provisional ball. Once we get up to the drive zone or where we think the ball is at, we might then get new information that changes, where we now know our golf ball to be, that potentially means our provisional ball has to be abandoned. So sometimes you hit a tee shot and you absolutely know that it's in a penalty area. That is different than what we're talking about, because if you are virtually certain or have knowledge that your ball's in the penalty area off the tee, you no longer have the option of hitting a provisional ball. So I hope that kind of is something that I think golfers need to just understand. It's what did you know at the tee box when you were hitting the provisional ball?
All right, so now we've looked at the teeing area, we'll look at penalty areas and the dropping procedure for those. All right, so the definition of a drop is to hold the ball and let go of it so that it falls through the air with the intent for that ball to be in play. If a player lets go of a golf ball without intent for it to be in play, or without intending for it to be dropped and be in play, then the player is not penalized. The player can pick that ball up. Sometimes you accidentally let go of a golf ball without it intending to be in play. You're not going to be penalized for that. You will just pick it up. And then when you are ready for that ball to be in play, then you will take a proper drop. Something else that's important to note when it comes to dropping, golf ball is not allowed to hit the player or their equipment or anything they may have until after it makes contact with the ground. All right. Each relief rule identifies a specific relief area where the ball must be dropped and where it needs to come to rest. So the relief area is where a player must drop a ball when taking relief under a rule, with the exception of back on the line relief. So this is something that we'll look at a little bit deeper into the presentation. But the reason for that is because we don't know the exact relief area for back on the line relief until after the ball has been dropped and made contact with the ground. So the relief area, we need to measure out the reference point, the size of the relief area measured from that reference point, and then also we'll look at the limits on location for the relief area. So back on the line relief, this is something that changed with the new 2023 rules, but the player must drop on the line in a location allowed by the rule being used, and the spot where the ball first touches the ground when dropped, that's what's going to create that relief area, and it's going to be 1 club length in any direction. So because we don't know exactly where that relief area is going to be before the ball is dropped, that's why this is going to be one of the procedures where we won't see players laying down clubs and putting tees in the ground until after that ball has been dropped. And then a club length. So for the purpose of measuring these areas, the length of your entire club is going to be used, starting at the toe of the club and ending at the butt end of the grip. Something important worth noting is this is generally going to be the longest club in your bag, unless your longest club is a putter. If your putter is the longest club in your bag, you are not allowed to use that club to measure any club length relief. And if you are going to be using a driver, please make sure that you are taking off the head cover to your driver. We only want the relief area as long as the actual club, not the club plus the head cover. All right, any questions about dropping? All right, Rule 17, penalty areas. So Rule 17 is a specific rule for penalty areas, which are going to be bodies of water or other areas defined by the committee where a ball is often lost or unable to be played. For 1 penalty stroke, players can use specific relief options to play a ball from outside of a penalty area. Penalty areas are defined as either red or yellow. It's important to note which color you are dealing with when you're out on a golf course, because this will affect a player's relief options. Like I said earlier, a player may stand in a penalty area to play a ball outside of the penalty area, including after taking relief from the penalty area. So if you hit your ball into a red penalty area and you take your drop, and when you take your stance to hit your shot, as long as your ball is outside of the penalty area and not touching that red or yellow line, you are good to go, even if your feet or your swing is still in the penalty area. Right, and a ball is going to be treated as in the penalty area when any part of the ball lies on or touches the ground or anything else inside the edge of the penalty area. So when it comes to penalty areas, players may play the ball as it lies without penalty under the same rules that apply to a ball in the general area, such as being able to remove loose impediments or taking practice swings. This was a big change in 2019. Players were given a little bit more freedom when it comes to playing a shot out of a penalty area. So if you're getting in there and you want to take a practice swing at it, just make sure that you're not changing a lie too much or changing the area by taking big whacks at maybe some long fescue where your ball might be at. Just make sure to try to keep the lie pretty much as close as to what it was before you stepped in to begin your practice swings. And then if you're not able to play your ball from the penalty area, you have a couple different options. So using this diagram, we can see that we've got a pond that has been marked as a red penalty area. It looks like we've hit our T-ball into it. So one of the options that we have is we can go back under penalty of stroke and distance, and we can replay the shot from where we previously played. So that looks like that's from the tee box, that number 1 box around the player. Second option is we can take back of the line relief. So we're going to keep the point where our ball last crossed that penalty area in line with the flag, and we can go as far back as we want, whether that's 20 yards, 100 yards, really just as far back as you want as the player. If you like having a 75-yard wedge shot more than you do a 50-yard wedge shot, that's going to be something that would be very beneficial for you to utilize. Or we can use our 2 club length lateral relief option. As we can see with the number 3 right there, we keep the point of where our ball last crossed the penalty area, and we use 2 club lengths, which is presumably the longest club in our bag, and that's how we create that relief area.
Karli, I didn't know if you wanted to intro this video before I played it.
Yeah, so this is going to be just a brief video explaining the back on the line relief. I think it's a lot easier to understand it with a video because you're able to visualize it a little bit better than with a picture. And so if any questions come up with this, submit them into the comments, and we can take a look at that and discuss it more. Okay, so it looks like the sound didn't go through with that video. So pretty much what that video was showing was a player hits their shot towards the green, it comes up short, and it lands in the red penalty area. So what a player can do is they can take the point of where that ball last crossed the red penalty area, and they will go in line with the flag as far back as they want to go. And then from there, in order to put a ball in play, they'll drop from knee height, and they need to drop that ball on that line that connects the flag and the point where their previous shot last crossed the penalty area. And then as soon as they drop, assuming that the ball is dropped on the line, the ball can roll up to 1 club length in any direction, including closer to the hole. Now, if a player drops a ball and it's not on that exact back of the line, they are going to be playing from a wrong spot. So in order to reduce the chance that, or in order to reduce themselves from getting a penalty from playing from the wrong spot, they will need to redrop on that line. And so I think the most important thing to note with this is that you get 1 club length in any direction, including closer to the hole, and that relief area will not be created until after the ball lands on that line. And then the other option for red penalty area, and this is only available for a red penalty area rather than a yellow penalty area, would be your lateral relief option. Now, the limits on this relief area is it must not be nearer the hole than the reference point. And it may be anywhere in any, it may be in any area of the course except for the same penalty area. So we need to make sure that the golf ball is coming to rest outside of that penalty area before we can play that shot. And if more than one area of the golf course is located within 2 club lengths of that reference point, the ball must come to rest in the relief area in the same area of the course where the ball first touched and when it was dropped into the relief area. So this was a new rule change this year. Some of you guys might be familiar with the situation that involved Ricky Fowler at the Phoenix Open a few years ago, where he dropped his ball after taking penalty area relief, and then it came to rest in the general area. And then he walked away and it flew back into the penalty area. Because that ball originally dropped and came to rest in the penalty area and then moved to a different area of the golf course. Now with this year's rules, he would need to make sure that his ball is put back into play into that general area rather than having to take penalty area relief again. And the penalty for playing a ball from the wrong place in breach of Rule 17.2 is going to be the general penalty, which is 2 strokes. All right, and then I'll turn it over to Nate. I think that he'll carry us out the rest of the presentation.
All right, thanks, Karli. Yeah, so we're now on to the next defined area of the golf course, which is the bunkers. And this is found in Rule 12. So basically to start, we just need to determine, like how do you determine when a ball is in the bunker? And basically the rule states that a ball is in the bunker when any part of the ball touches sand on the ground inside the edge of the bunker or is inside the edge of the bunker and rests on ground where sand normally would be, such as where sand was blown or washed away by wind or water. It's also going to be considered in the bunker when it's resting in or on a loose impediment, so like a leaf, for example, or a movable obstruction like this rake in the diagram, or an abnormal course condition, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or an integral object. Basically, if it's touching sand in the bunker or is on the ground where sand normally would be, that's going to be determining whether that ball's in the bunker. So in this diagram, also, you're going to see a ball that's inside the edge of the bunker, but it's resting on grass or a prepared area. That ball is not going to be considered in the bunker. And so your normal general area, allowances will be allowed there in that situation. All right, so something that happened in 2019 was that they did relax some restrictions in the bunker. One of these happened to be the ability for a player to remove loose impediments in the bunker. That was, something that a player was always not allowed to do in the past, and now, a player can now remove loose impediments and movable obstructions, provided that they do so in a reasonable way, where the touching or movement of the sand is not excessive, and it's not in any way of trying to improve your condition of the next stroke. And we'll talk a little bit on the next slide about just kind of what types of things you can't do in the bunker, and by doing these things, you're basically going to see a penalty as a result. And now, before making your stroke at a ball in a bunker, you are not allowed to deliberately touch the sand in the bunker with your club, your hand, rake, or another object, basically to test the condition of the sand to learn information for the next stroke. So that to test the condition part is very important, because you're really not allowed to try to gather more information than what's allowed under the rules, such as digging in your feet, for example. 2 other things you're not allowed to do is obviously take a practice swing that actually, where your club's actually touching the sand. And you're also not allowed to ground the club in front of or behind the ball, which is something that's always been in the rules, and everybody kind of has grown up understanding that part of the rule. Now, when touching sand, obviously we talked about the times where you're able to touch it when you're removing loose impediments, provided that you're not doing it to an excess. There's other times where you are allowed to touch sand where it does not result in a penalty. And in these cases, you are allowed to dig your feet in to take a stance for a practice swing or a stroke, provided that you're not, excessively building a stance, for example, not doing more than what's necessary. You are allowed to smooth the bunker to care for the golf course. So you're always allowed to rake the bunker. Placing clubs, equipment, or other objects in the bunker. So, growing up, I didn't know that you're actually allowed, to bring your clubs into the bunker. Say you're trying to decide what kind of shot you want to hit, and it's a big bunker. You're allowed, under the rules, to actually bring your golf bag in the bunker and set it down, next to where you're going to be playing that next shot. You're also allowed under the rules. So say, for example, you're going to be playing, taking unplayable ball relief in the bunker. You are allowed to use your club, and put that club on the ground, on the sand to measure. You're able to, use a tee to mark or lift, for replacing and taking other actions under the rules. So that's, if you're ever in the process of doing anything under a certain rule, you're allowed to touch the sand in that case. There's times when you might be probing the sand to determine if that ball's and you might be a ball that's completely covered by sand, and you're allowed at that point to use your club or hand or a tee to search for that golf ball. And if you do happen to move sand in that case to find that ball, that is completely fine under the rules. Provided obviously that you replace the sand afterwards. You are allowed to lean on a club to rest or stay balanced to prevent a fall. So say you're going into a steep bunker by, for instance, and you want to, use your club as a cane, like that's completely fine. And also striking the sand in frustration or anger is allowed under the rules. And you've seen this obviously on tour with, guys like, like Rory or Sergio in recent years. And, obviously there might be code of conduct policies in place that maybe would frown on that, but according to the rules, that is permissible. So if you do break any of these rules, say you do ground your club in the bunker behind the ball, or you take a practice swing and hit sand, or even touch sand on your backswing, if you do any of those things, or you're going to be facing a general penalty, which is 2 strokes. Any questions on bunkers? Okay. The next rule we're going to cover is Rule 16, and we're going to cover a couple different parts of this rule. We won't cover it fully but we're going to cover kind of the 2 main things that kind of happen the most, especially in high school golf. So, and those are parts 16.1 and 16.3, which is abnormal course conditions, which we're going to talk a little bit about the definitions in there a little bit too, and then embedded ball. So as I said, this is abnormal course conditions. We are basically figuring out how to take free relief from when we have interference, basically from these 4 different conditions. You have animal holes, and that's previously used to be called burrowing animal holes, but today these can be basically holes even dug by a dog. In the past, a dog was not necessarily considered a burrowing animal, but now it's just any hole made by an animal. You can also, we're going to learn about taking relief from ground and repair, which in this case is a very plainly, painted circle around like it looks like a cart rut. We have immovable obstructions such as cart paths, which are very common things that we take relief from, sometimes almost every time we play golf. And then you have temporary water, which formerly was called casual water, but now has been changed to temporary water. And so these are all collectively, as I mentioned, kind of under the umbrella of abnormal course conditions, but they all do have separate definitions. And I do recommend, if you do have the chance to get into the rules, or want to get your players into the rules, I would definitely start in the definitions, because they do offer a great explanation. So under this rule, you are not going to get relief from movable obstructions, boundary objects, or integral objects. And movable obstructions in this case, in that picture on the left, is a trash basket and a ball washer. Now, in this player's case, he can physically pick that basket up, and he can move that ball washer, and he can actually have others assist him in that process. And so he would not need to necessarily take relief in that case, because he can move those objects to play on. For the boundary object, which is that fence, in this example, if a player was up against that fence, he has, really a couple options. If that player doesn't want to play that ball, he could go back to the tee and play under stroke and distance, or he can take unplayable ball relief and get 2 club lengths or go back on the line from there. A player who happens to be, up against, happens to have a ball resting on this rock wall, for instance, being an integral object, he's not going to be able to get relief. In this case, definitely not, because he would have to take relief if he wanted to under the penalty area relief option, which is a stroke penalty.
Hey, Nate, why don't you take a minute and explain what boundary objects are and what integral objects are?
Sure. So boundary objects are going to be like walls. They could be stakes. They could be gates.
But what are they defining?
Oh, they're defining the golf course basically. And so, they're what Karli mentioned earlier. So that image she had earlier of that white dotted line that was kind of going around the golf course, like that would be basically, it's an object that's identifying the boundary of the golf course. If that does that answer kind of what you were?
Yeah, I mean, it's what's telling you what's inbounds and out of bounds for these guys. If it's marking out of bounds, that's a boundary object. Those are not treated as movable obstructions or immovable obstructions. You don't get free relief from those.
Yep.
And then you can speak to integral objects.
So
those are a lot more uncertain sometimes, integral objects.
Yeah, so integral objects are going to be objects that the committee really needs to decide on prior to, say, an event. These are objects that say like there might be a big tree that's going to have like a metal a grounding wire attached to it. And obviously if a player is going to have interference from the wire itself, we're not necessarily, as by deeming it an integral object, you're not going to necessarily give a player relief for that, because it's you're going to try to you, by giving relief, you're basically getting that player away from the tree, versus when that object being closely attached to it's not necessarily I don't know does that, I'm trying to explain it a certain way.
Yeah, it's really, if there's objects that are part of the golf course that you do not want to give free relief for, you would declare them to be integral objects. And that's why obviously you don't get free relief from integral objects. And the example of a lightning rod on a tree, we don't typically want to grant relief from trees when we play golf. I mean, it's part of the challenge of playing golf. So if you don't declare something like that to be an integral object, a player could rightfully claim, hey, that's an immovable obstruction that's attached to this tree, and therefore I should be allowed relief. So that's what we're talking about here, is the committee needs to determine what integral objects are and place them on a rule sheet. And so if they haven't done that, and you have the ability to take advantage of a lightning rod that's attached to a tree, by all means do it. That's kind of a mistake that the committee should have made. But the other side of that coin is make sure you know what is declared to be integral objects, so that you don't, because if you do take relief from those, you would get penalized for playing from a wrong place.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So part of this rule, there's really a definition and a process that's pretty important that we have to kind of understand before we get into the rule itself, but it's called nearest point of complete relief. And this is basically the estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the ball's original spot, but not nearer the hole than that spot. So in this case, you have a player's ball who's resting on a cart path, and this player obviously chose to take relief. Being a right-handed player, he needs to figure out where that ball is going to be nearest to the ball's original spot, but not near the hole, and not being affected by that condition that he was taking relief from. So on the left, being a right-handed player, he's 4 feet away from his original ball, and on the right, he's 6 feet away. So he's going to be playing the ball from the closer point, which is 4 feet. Now, when taking nearest point of complete relief, there's kind of a process that especially officials would go through. But when you're trying to estimate your reference point, you're going to first kind of identify the choice of club, stance, swing, and line of play that they would normally use for that upcoming stroke. And generally that's going to mean you're going to try to get them off the cart path for the example that we just looked at, and make sure that his stance, the lie of the ball, and his area of intended swing are not being impeded by that condition anymore. You don't necessarily always have to simulate that, but it is good practice, and something that I generally always have my players do when I'm giving a ruling. I do want them to grab the club they're most likely going to use for the next stroke, to ensure basically that they're taking full relief from that condition. So here's an example where this player is taking his nearest point of complete relief off the cart path, and this player is he's looking to take his relief, and it's putting him basically into a condition that maybe is not going to be as ideal as if he even played off the cart path. And so I always kind of recommend kind of look and know where you're going to be taking your relief to, because where you might be moving your ball to, or where you have to go to. In this case, a right-handed player, the ball is on the right-hand side of the cart path. He's going to have to go to the right side. It's not always going to be the nicest spot, always. And yeah, you can keep going there. So there's times when we're going to have to figure out, when we're in the course of play, like when do we have interference, and what causes interference. And basically in these two pictures, the player's ball is either touching or is in or on an abnormal course condition. So in that top picture, that player's ball is obviously being affected by that course condition. Is inside the white line, so he's in ground and repair. He's going to be able to either play that shot if he chooses to, or he can take penalty, or take abnormal course condition relief and drop at his nearest point where he has no more interference. Abnormal course conditions can also physically interfere with the player's area of intended stance or area of intended swing. So the top picture, for example, he basically has all three areas that are affecting him. His lie of the ball, his stance, and his area of intended swing are all being affected in that case. Below, he's basically probably most likely just a swing in that case. It's being affected. And there are some special cases where line of play, when the ball is on the putting green. So it's only when the ball is on the putting green and you have interference from one of these abnormal course conditions that you can take relief. So line of play is not something you get relief from anything else, anywhere else on the golf course, like in the general area, for example. So now, if the abnormal course condition is close enough to distract the player, but does not meet any of these requirements that we just mentioned, there is no interference, and so the player would not be able to take relief under this rule. And even though that player may be distracted, it does not give her the right to be able to take relief in this case. And also, there are times, so you can always take relief if you're in the general area, but if you're in a penalty area, for example, in this case, she's got relief, or she's got, interference from the bridge, and maybe the post or the railing, but because she's in a penalty area, she's not allowed to take relief in this case. She does, because she is in a penalty area, she can take penalty area relief though, which is a stroke penalty. Now, when you're in the general area, the player is always allowed to take free relief by dropping the original ball or another ball. So you're allowed under this rule to substitute a new ball. Say this ball happened to be scuffed, for instance, this player could then use that ball and or use a new ball in that case. And this is just a diagram of just a general abnormal course condition kind of relief area. In this case, the player determined that the reference point for nearest point of complete relief was behind the ball and behind the GUR. And from that point, the player gets one club length in a one club length relief area, and the ball just must be dropped and remain in that relief area. There's also times when you may have to take abnormal course condition relief for a ball in the bunker. You can basically do it the same way. You figure out where your nearest point of complete relief is going to be. you'll take your 1 club length and you can drop in a relief area. The relief area must be in the bunker to be able to receive the free relief. So moving, oh, sorry. Did you have anything else, Chad? Okay, so moving on to 16.3 embedded ball. So we're going to kind of cover, you know, what causes the ball to be embedded and kind of what's, you know, when is a ball not embedded, basically, and we're going to kind of go through this, and obviously this time of year in the spring when you're dealing with a lot of moisture, the ground's kind of, you know, it's wet, it's thawing, you could have a lot of situations like this coming up, and so it's a good one to cover. Now, a ball has to be embedded for you to be able to take a relief. It's got to be embedded in the general area. There are some exceptions when relief is not going to be allowed for a ball embedded in the general area. In this case, there's not going to be any relief because the ball is embedded in sand in a part of the general area, but it's not cut to fairway height or less. So you're not going to necessarily see a lot of this in Iowa, but if you go to places like Pinehurst, for example, in North Carolina, there, you know, a lot of the rough areas are all going to be sandy soil, and so they're going to see situations like this a lot. There's also times when your ball could be embedded, but it might be in an area where, or in a situation or an area where you're not necessarily normally going to be able to play that shot anyway. And it's kind of, you know, by your ball being embedded, it's not necessarily going to be your get out of jail free card. In that case, you're going to, you know, you might have to take unplayable ball in that situation. And it's kind of a unique situation that doesn't always come up very often, but there are times when say a player's ball is deep in a bush and you deem it's embedded, it's not necessarily going to be you're not necessarily going to be able to get it out of that circumstance. So a player's ball is basically embedded only if it is in its own pitch mark made as a result of the player's previous stroke and part of the ball is below the level of the ground. In these diagrams, you're going to see the white line or the dotted line basically represents a kind of a plane, and if the ball breaks that plane and goes below the surface, it's going to be deemed embedded. So that even if let's say the ball embeds, but there's grass between the ball and the dirt, as long as it breaks that plane, that ball will be considered embedded, and as long as that ball got airborne, it was in its own pitch mark and made by the player's previous stroke, that player can take relief. Now, the relief area for a ball that's been embedded is pretty simple. You're basically just going to be finding the spot right behind where the ball has been embedded. And you're going to see that it's just the same as the other procedures where you have a club length relief area. And again, you're just dropping and ball just has to stay in that relief area. So any questions on abnormal course conditions or nearest point of complete relief for embedded ball?
I was just going to add to kind of on to what Nate talked about in regards to nearest point of complete relief. The important thing to take note of is that it's not a choice. You're never going to have a choice of where your nearest point is. By definition, the nearest point is whatever the nearest point is. And what Nate was trying to articulate, I think, and he did a pretty good job of saying with the one diagram where the kid's nearest point was essentially under a tree off to the right of the cart path, is to say that nearest point might be in a bush, it might be in the middle of a tree, it might be in really tall grass. So before you go to pick up that original ball off of the path or whatever you're taking relief from, make sure you know where you're going to be required to go, because it might not be the best place, and playing the ball as it lies is always an option. So that I just wanted to make a point that you never get to choose. I get to go to the right or the left side of the path. The one side's going to be the nearest point, and that's the one you're going to have to go to.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. All right, we're going to be moving on to our next defined area, which is going to be the putting green. And that's found in Rule 13. So in this rule, we're going to cover these 4 points. Basically, we first have to determine when a ball is on the putting green, and I'm not necessarily going to cover it now because Karli kind of mentioned it earlier, that a ball is on the putting green when any part of the ball basically touches the putting green. We're going to talk a little bit about marking, lifting, and cleaning the ball. Or actually, sorry, we're not going to be talking about that, but I do want you to know that that's always been available. That has not changed. So we can if you have any questions about that later, we can cover it, but we figured it was something that you're pretty familiar with. But we are going to cover the improvements that are allowed on a putting green and what you're able to do now, which was changed in 2019. And also cover what happens when a ball or ball marker moves on the putting green by natural forces. So to start, we're going to talk about repairing a damage. And a player may repair damage on the putting green without penalty by taking reasonable actions to restore the putting green as nearly as possible to its original condition. So there's going to be times when a person or an animal will create damage, obviously, and there's going to be indents, scrapes, anything that's done by the player or the equipment. Those are all going to be things that a player can fix. Now, things that the player cannot fix will be like aerification holes or vertical cutting, lines, things that are done by normal maintenance practices. So if you're if you're running a tournament, for example, and you have aerification holes at the golf course, say it's just a time of the year when they're aerifying the golf course, there is a local rule put in where you guys can make a decision to allow a player to take that, say your ball happens to be resting in an aerification hole on the putting green. You can have a local rule written to where you can have that ball placed outside, left or right, no closer to the hole, just so your next putt basically is not coming out of an aerification hole. And so I don't necessarily have that model local rule memorized, but we can get that rule to you because it's something that will probably happen this spring when courses kind of get going with their normal maintenance practices. So basically there are two specific rules for a ball or ball marker that moves on the putting green. And the things that we want you to remember is that there's no penalty for accidentally causing your ball to move. And eventually we'll cover what happens when the ball moves by natural forces, but just know that any accidental movement on the putting green is not going to be a penalty, but as long as you replace that ball on its spot. So there is no penalty, as I said, if the player, opponent, or another player in stroke play accidentally moves the player's ball or ball marker on the putting green. The player must play the ball on its original spot, which, if it's not known, must be estimated. So, and let's say you happen to put your putter down, it's wet, and the bottom of your putter is wet, and it picks up that coin, for example, or you happen to kick it on accident because you didn't, you're walking and you're trying to find it to replace your ball. Again, you just place that ball marker on its original spot, and if you don't know, again, you can estimate it. Now, if natural forces cause a player's ball on the putting green to move, where the player must play from next depends on whether the ball had already been lifted and replaced on the putting green. And so basically, if a ball had already been lifted and replaced, that ball basically owns that spot. So let's say a gust of wind comes and it moves that ball. Let's say it even goes closer to the hole. The player would not be allowed in that place, in that situation, to play that ball from where its new spot is. The player is going to have to go and replace that ball because it owns that spot. So if you have not already lifted and replaced, that ball would then not own that spot, and wherever that ball would then move to would be the place that the player would play from next. So normally we show a video here of Tiger doing this, but if you do have any questions on this is it's a little change. It's been around since 2019, but basically it's just trying to be a little bit more friendly, especially when you have conditions that are not too nice out. All right. And the last thing we're going to cover just kind of shortly is just what to do basically in situations where if you're a player and you're playing a tournament, what to do when you get into a situation where you have a doubt as to what the proper procedure is for a certain situation. And there happens to not be anybody anybody around to give you help or guidance. There's no rules officials, there's no coaches. The players don't necessarily have the right to just make up their own decision as a group. There's no rule really about group consensus. So in that case, the best option is to follow Rule 20.1C3, which allows a player to play 2 balls when uncertain. And there's just a few steps to this process that they need to do to basically do it the right way. And the first parts of this are basically that the player just has to announce their intentions. Say they get into a situation where they think their ball's in ground under repair, for example, and it's not marked. They believe that they should have relief. And before they play that ball, they need to say, hey guys, I'm gonna play 2 balls because I don't know if this is marked properly. They need to declare their intentions with which ball that they want to score with, and that has to be done before playing that second ball, or really before playing either ball. Now when that score, let's say they score the same number, they still have to go in and they have to report the facts of the situation to the committee before their scorecard has been turned in. So whether they made the same score or not, it's a must. And if they do not do that, basically the penalty for that is a disqualification. So now if a player happens to play a ball, let's say the player plays a ball and then decides, that didn't seem right. That situation, I probably should have played 2 balls, and they decide at that point that they want to play 2 balls. They can, but that second ball is not going to count the ball that was played first before that they had made their declaration that they wanted to play 2 balls. Basically that first ball is going to count in that situation. So it's a really good rule to have on your rule sheet, because it does let that player know that there is a situation like this available, or a rule available to them, so they don't have to wait around and hold up play.
And to add on to that, having it on your rule sheet, it's not a local rule, so you don't have to have it on there in order for someone to do this. But having it on there and kind of listing out what the players are required to do is it's just nice. We put it on most of our rule sheets just because it reminds the player that they need to declare which golf ball they want to count with. And by the way, if the player forgets or doesn't declare which one they want to count with, the rule, we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time getting into the intricacies of it, but the rule will try to give them the best possible result that it can based on what actually happened and which golf ball was played under the rules. Because sometimes you'll have 2 golf balls that were played under the rules. Sometimes you'll have one that was played under the rules, one that wasn't. And then sometimes you might have 2 golf balls that neither one was played under the rules. And that speaks to the reason we make you talk to the committee and get an answer, is because number one, we want to make sure you actually have a legit score on the hole, because you obviously had some uncertainty on how you were supposed to proceed. And then number 2 is, let's get you an answer so that if you ever encounter this same situation again, maybe that next time you don't have to play 2 golf balls because you've gotten an answer. So that's kind of speaks to the reason you're even if you score the same with both golf balls, you're required to report that to the committee.
So that's kind of it. I guess we do have a little bit of time. I guess if anybody has any questions, be a good time to ask them.
I'm curious if I might have figured out why the sound didn't work on that video. And so what I would tell everyone is, if you want to type a question into the chat real quick, or you're all muted, so if you want to just ask a question, unmute yourself real fast. And in the meantime, I might try to sneak back here and show that video again. It was under penalty areas, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's this one. So give me. Give me a thumbs up if it's working.
Nah.
No sound still?
No sound.
Okay. Well, sorry, I'm not sure why. We did test that this morning and it worked for us. But for some reason it's not working right now.
Would we be able to send that video to Ben when we send him this recording?
Potentially,
Just
yeah.
have that available.
Yeah, that video, we could send it as a separate file at the very least, so. I think I'll just put up that last slide that has our contact info on it. If you guys want to jot down our emails or that phone number. If you do have anything that pops up throughout the season or want to ask a specific question sort of offline, feel free to give us a call. We can usually almost certainly give you an answer. And if it's something really difficult, then we might have to call the USGA, but we've done that in the past. So wouldn't be the first time. Well, thanks everyone. We'll hang on for just a few more minutes if somebody's in the middle of typing a question into the chat. But for those of you who don't have any questions, want to start to drop off, go right ahead. Where there is a question, where is relief if there is a penalty area next to a cart path? So speaking to the areas of the course, so let's pretend, I guess my question is, where's your golf ball? If you're talking about taking penalty area relief or you're taking relief because your ball's on the cart path, I'll answer both. If your ball's in the penalty area, chances are you might decide to drop on that cart path because the cart path is in the general area. That's a different part of the golf course. You might be required to drop there, and you do that and you find out where your golf ball ends up. And if it becomes in play, and now you're entitled to take relief from that cart path, then you proceed again under a different rule that allows for that free relief. If your ball's on the cart path and there's a penalty area that is right next to it, your ball is lying in the general area and the cart path is an immovable obstruction from which you get free relief. You are not allowed to drop in the penalty area for free relief. So you would be required to go to the side of the cart path where the nearest point of free relief is nearest point of complete relief is available that is not in the penalty area. So you're not allowed to change the part of the golf course you're in when you're taking that free relief. That's a good question, because a lot of people want to, especially when you hit it into a penalty area and the cart path's right there, a lot of people will just immediately go all the way outside the cart path and everything. And depending on how it's actually marked, that's technically probably going to be a violation and you'd be playing from a wrong place. All right. All right. Along those same lines, do you need to take complete relief from a cart path or can you stand on the cart path? Nate or Karli, do you guys want to answer that one?
Yeah, I can. So if you are taking relief from a cart path, you are going to have to take complete relief. Like Nate pointed out with that picture with the golfer whose relief was going to be under a tree, it's really important to figure out where your relief area is going to be before you pick up your golf ball, because there might be a time where it's better for you to play off of a cart path rather than taking complete relief, because it might put you in a worse spot. We always say it's the nearest point, not the nicest point. And so, yeah, if you do decide that you want to take cart path relief, you need to take complete relief, and that includes your stance and swing.
Though it includes where your feet go just as much when we're talking about a cart path, just as much as it is where the ball is at. So yes, the recording will be available. Like I said, I think we'll be posting it on our IGA website for sure. I will get it to Ben at the Girls Union, and I think he's going to share it somehow, whether that's just via a link on their website or, you know, exactly how he sends that out. But I think he'll send it to his whole list of coaches somehow, some way. Probably maybe give us a couple days before he would send it, but very soon. Well, good luck to everyone this spring. and let's all hope the weather cooperates and is a lot nicer than it was last spring.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for
Mhm.
hopping on,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks, everyone.
All right. I'm going to end the meeting and then let it do its thing with the recording processing. So Nate, Karli, I'll see you guys tomorrow.